Welcome back, everyone. Tonight's story is based on true events whispered among urban explorers in Japan. Deep in the mountains of Gifu Prefecture stands an abandoned Ryokan, a traditional inn where guests once arrived for peace and healing, yet some say a few never truly left. Locals warn of strange rituals, a cursed number that keeps returning. 7. Inside, explorers discovered rooms prepared for unseen visitors, voices singing in the dark, and a presence waiting for its circle to be complete. Stay with me, because later you'll understand why stepping into this Ryokan might mean becoming guest number 4, 5, or even 7 yourself. Takashi wasn't some professional ghost hunter. He was just a regular IT employee in Tokyo. Days spent in front of a glowing monitor, evenings cooking quick bowls of udon, weekends tidying up his apartment or taking his camera out to capture neon lights. Miki worked at a cafe near Shinjuku Station, loved plants and pottery, and carefully saved her paychecks to one day buy a proper set of kitchen pots. Haruka was a teaching assistant in classical Japanese literature, living in a cramped apartment filled with stacks of books and scribbled notes. At night, she liked watching travel vlogs. 3 ordinary young people with ordinary routines and ordinary dreams. The only unusual thing binding them together was a shared hobby: haikyo, urban exploration of forgotten, abandoned places. To them, it was never about danger or thrill-seeking. It was about breathing outside the rhythm of the city, stepping into spaces where time had stopped. This trip seemed just as simple. A change of scenery, Takashi had said when he sent the mysterious coordinates to their group chat. A chance to take some photos, tell a story. They weren't searching for treasure or testing their courage against haunted legends. Just 3 friends escaping Tokyo noise for a weekend. Their backpacks held the most mundane items: rice balls, bottled water, power banks, light jackets, bandages, chocolate bars. Haruka carried a notebook, promising to record how it felt to stand inside an old wooden inn. Miki stuffed a bag of sunflower seeds, her favorite snack, into her pack. Takashi carefully wiped his camera lens, checked the memory card, and prepared like he always did before a casual photography outing. The morning they left Tokyo, the sky was bright and clear. They passed familiar streets, stopped at a gas station, grabbed canned coffee from a vending machine. Their conversations circled around rent prices, the latest movie release, which ramen shop to try next. Everything was ordinary, so ordinary that anyone could imagine themselves in their place. On the highway, Haruka squinted at the distant mountains and sighed. I wish we could escape like this every weekend. Miki nodded, counting cherry blossom trees by the roadside, already daydreaming about buying a bigger monstera plant. Takashi turned on an old playlist, the same one they'd played during a beach trip the summer before. When the road narrowed into winding mountain lanes, the scenery was still charming. Wooden farmhouses, terraced fields, the smell of damp earth. They stopped at a roadside shop to buy extra wet wipes and batteries. The elderly shopkeeper slipped them a bag of sour plum candies, warning that the mountain roads make you tired. No one mentioned ghosts. No one spoke of danger. The only signs of change were that the map grew blanker, cell signal faltered, and the air grew cooler as they climbed. They parked at a small clearing where old wooden posts marked the end of the drivable path. From here, they had to walk. Miki tightened her shoelaces. Haruka zipped her jacket. Takashi slung the camera strap across his chest. The stone path up the mountain felt at first like a Sunday hike. Low steps, filtered light through bamboo, the smell of resin. They kept chatting about coffee machines, basho poems, and whether Takashi should finally print and frame some of his photos. It was all light, human chatter, just the kind you'd expect from any group of young friends on an outing. Then the first odd detail appeared, though they didn't see it as ominous, just curious. Shimenawa ropes, sacred cords in Shinto tradition, were tied around the trees, not fresh and white like at shrines, but yellowed, frayed, some fallen to the ground. "Is there a festival around here?" Miki asked, picking up a stained paper strip. Haruka shrugged. "Shimenawa marks sacred ground, but these are so old, probably abandoned too." Takashi snapped photos and laughed. "Good material for the video." They walked on, slower, but still thinking like tourists rather than trespassers. Around a bend, the forest opened, and a torii gate came into view. But not the bright vermilion kind you'd expect. This one was black, its paint peeling, wood faded, characters carved across the beam too faint to read. They stopped, admiring it. "Strange but beautiful," Takashi murmured as he raised his camera. Miki brushed the rough surface with her fingers. Haruka jotted down in her notebook. "Black torii, forest gate, wind falls silent." Because under the gate, the forest seemed muted. Not completely still, but as if someone had turned the volume down. Yet no one called it unnatural. They only said, "Let's hurry before sunset." Beyond the torii stretched an old garden, stone lanterns moss-covered and cracked, a wooden bridge spanning a pond, long-dried dead lotus leaves littering the basin. The scene wasn't frightening, not yet. It felt like nostalgia, like a forgotten postcard. "If restored, it'd be stunning," Miki whispered. Takashi nodded, imagining photo angles from the upper floors. Haruka noted the architecture she recognized: curved roofs, deep eaves, sliding doors. Then, rising from the heart of that garden, stood the Ryokan, 3 stories tall, its rooflines sweeping gracefully, woodwork still showing the touch of a master craftsman. Time had weathered the walls grey, shutters hung crooked, tiles had fallen to expose dark gaps. Yet the building wasn't grotesque. It was beautiful in decay, like a giant asleep. At a distance, it didn't look haunted. It looked dignified. A relic. Takashi lifted his camera. Miki exhaled softly. Haruka wrote, "Beautiful, but sad." They weren't thinking of spirits. They were thinking, "We found a story worth telling." They climbed the steps to the veranda, city shoes on mountain wood. The main door, heavy and old, creaked open with surprising ease. The sound stretched long, echoing deeper into the halls, as though the house itself sighed awake. Inside, dust lay across the floorboards, but the grain of the wood still glimmered faintly. A brass bell still sat on the reception desk. Paintings warped by humidity clung to the walls. The 3 exchanged smiles, not fear. "It's like walking into a movie set," Haruka said. The silence inside was thick, pressing, yet they mistook it for tranquility. No birds, no insects, no wind, only the muffled sound of their own footsteps. But to city dwellers, silence can feel like peace, not warning. Takashi unfolded his tripod, preparing to film. Miki wiped her hands with a wet tissue, snapped a photo, and messaged a friend. "Weekend chill," literally. Haruka wrote in her notebook, "Wood and dust like an old book." It all felt so normal, so human. And that's the point, the ordinariness. 3 friends with backpacks on a casual adventure, sharing candy, joking about soft floors, marveling at a building's design. It's the kind of scene anyone could imagine themselves in. When the door finally closed behind them, the creak lingered a beat too long. But Takashi rang the brass bell, ting, a bright sound that made them laugh. Just kids in an old place, with nothing to fear, for now. At that moment, 3 backpacks on the floor, camera recording, notebook open, candy shared. The audience thinks, this could be me. And that's what makes everything that follows so terrifying. Because the silence wasn't ordinary. It was a mask, stretched tight, waiting to split. They reached the threshold at the exact moment the last ridge of sunlight slipped behind the cedar crowns. Inside, the air was cooler, almost polite in the way it pressed against their skin. The reception desk waited like a stage prop between acts, ledger books splayed, an antique bell balanced on its saucer, a clipped sprig of something dry and forgotten. Takashi lifted his camera on instinct, angling for the wide shot. The frame swallowed the room swallowed their voices. The first unsettling detail was small enough to dismiss. A strand of hair caught on the lip of the bell, silver fine and perfectly straight, too clean to have gathered 15 years of dust. Mickey noticed it and frowned. Could be fishing line, she said, half to herself. Or nylon. She plucked it away and the bell chimed once, a sharp, delicate note that seemed to unlock a deeper silence. Takashi cleared his throat and narrated in a cheerful whisper he didn't believe. Reception area. Early 20th century fixtures intact. Ledger present. Minimal vandalism. We're good. He waited for the comfort of his own authority, but the camera's red light only stared back. They moved down the corridor, the floorboards soft with age. Haruka slid open a paper door and they found their first room. A low dining table set for two. Lacquer dulled to a gentle bruise. Ceramic dishes still arranged as though the next course was late but not forgotten. There was a teacup with a ring at the bottom. Evaporation's tidy handwriting. Mickey lifted a lid and saw only dust. She smiled to nobody. Staged for tourists, probably, or the owners left in a hurry. She set the lid down with theatrical care, as if appeasing a host. The second detail was a scent, faint kelp and sweetness, a memory of soup that shouldn't be there. Haruka inhaled, thoughtful. Old tatami can hold smells for years, she said, and this valley traps air. An academic umbrella spread over the moment. They stood under it gratefully. They pressed on, counting rooms in a low murmur. 3, 4, 5. The corridor kinked left, then right, one of those Japanese rhythms designed to slow footsteps and sharpen attention. It worked. They were listening to themselves when they found the futon room. 4 futon mattresses lay folded, corners squared like origami, each with a pale linen roll on top. The folds were so straight, Mickey touched one edge just to dent it. The crease sighed back into place, resilient as new cloth. That's recent, Takashi said. Maybe a caretaker, Haruka answered quickly. Villages keep these places from collapsing. Pride. She said the last word like an offering, an explanation with a bow attached. Takashi filmed the window. The paper screen admitted a flat ash-blue light. Behind it, leaves moved without sound. He panned to the floor and caught another detail. A shoe scuff near the threshold, curved, dark, the exact half-moon you see when someone pivots. He zoomed in and out, and the scuff persisted like a bruise in the grain. Caretaker, he echoed, filing it in the drawer labelled normal. They found the circle in the next room. The tatami mats were new compared to the hall, a fresh colour of straw. 5 zabuton cushions sat in a mathematics of distance that thanked the eye for noticing. Every gap equal, every angle intended. The fabric was indigo, unfrayed, a constellation of stitches so tight the cushions looked sculpted rather than sewn. Mickey crouched and pressed a fingertip to one edge. No dust plume, no grit, just clean. It's ceremonial, Haruka said, quieting even her own certainty. Or it was. This could be where guests waited for the bath. She gestured to a blank wall as if a missing door might respond to her reasoning. Or it's a prank. Urban explorers love arranging things. Takashi filmed the circle and felt the camera weigh more than it should, as if the lens were drinking something thick. In the viewfinder, for one heartbeat, the cushions seemed deeper than cushions ought to be, the way mirrors feel deep when you're alone. He steadied his hands, and the illusion cancelled out. Okay, he said. We log it. We don't overthink it. He looked at Mickey, because she was the one who sometimes overthought things, sensing currents the others didn't. She nodded obediently, but her attention kept returning to the equal spaces on the floor, as if something were missing from each interval. A thing that would complete the geometry. They returned to the corridor. The temperature shifted there. Not colder exactly, but narrower, like the air had been braided and their bodies had to pass between the strands. Takashi chalked it up to the building's lungs. Hot day outside, cool belly inside. He said it out loud to give it shape. Heat differential. They heard the first footstep above them as a question mark. A single weight settling, wood complaining softly, then another, exactly across from the first, as if someone were pacing. They stopped. A third step answered somewhere between the first two, a triangle of pressure in the ceiling. Takashi lifted his light, and the beam met old boards and the underside of a promise. Animals, Mickey said quickly. Martens, cats, tanuki. The beams carry sound. It always sounds heavier. She had read that sentence in a forum once and adopted it for moments like this. She did not add that the rhythm was wrong, too measured, too human, a metronome with a cuff and heel. Haruka tapped her phone to check the signal she knew she wouldn't have. We should mark the rooms and finish the first floor. If there's anyone else here, better we know it now. They moved again. The corridor ended at a corner framed by two stone lanterns dragged inside long ago, now serving as guardians of a dead end. On the left, a storage alcove held wooden trays and a stack of folded yukata. Takashi ran a hand over the top one and lifted his palm. It came away clean. He laughed because surprise needed somewhere to go. No dust? Someone's using this, Mickey said softly, the sentence hanging in the air like breath in winter. Then she rewrote it. Or there's a draft. Dust falls weird in empty buildings. They rounded back toward reception to set their base. The second unsettling detail waited for them there, pretending it had always been in plain sight. On the ledger, a page was turned. Not far, just one leaf over, but the fibre had caught and torn a little near the spine, the way paper does when turned with a damp finger. Mickey put her hands in her jacket pockets to prevent them from touching anything else. Takashi filmed the tear, as if tears could be evidence. Old tourists, Haruka said, and she made her tone light, like a guide waving away a smudge on a map. People touch everything. They unrolled their sleeping bags in a triangle, backs guarded by timber and by each other. Takashi set the tripod and checked levels, adjusting the angle until the lens could see door, hall, and the first 3 meters of staircase. It made him feel practical, and practical felt safe. He narrated again into the red dot. Base established. We'll do a second floor sweep, then return by midnight. Before they climbed, Mickey paused at the entryway. The door they had left ajar still yawned the way they'd left it, but the shimenawa hung across the frame now told a different story. Earlier, they had read as exhausted ropes, yellowed, slack, unremarkable. Now she noticed small fibres on the floor directly beneath the lowest twist, bright and fresh as new straw shavings. She blinked, and the brightness dulled. "Takashi," she began, then smiled at her own eyes betraying her. "Never mind. Lighting." He nodded, relieved to have her on the rational side of the line. Relief is contagious. The room inhaled with them. The footsteps returned overhead, establishing a pattern their minds could fit into boxes. 5 paces, pause. 5 paces back, pause. Takashi named it out loud so it would feel like data. Thermal expansion, or an animal's patrol route. Mickey agreed. Haruka added that old timber creaks when humidity shifts. The trio stacked explanations like sandbags against a rising river they refused to see. And yet, as they placed the last sandbag, The audience, whoever they would become tomorrow, watching this footage edited and trimmed, could already sense the water licking through. It was there in the hair on the bell, the scuff that pivoted toward them, the circle with one space unfilled, the clean fold that remembered a body, the ledger page turned by a finger that hadn't dissolved into legend. It was there in the cadence of steps above, a hospitality's rehearsal. The building was doing what it had always done, preparing for arrivals. Takashi shouldered the camera. "Second floor," he said, and his voice was steady because that's what the story needed from him. Miki clicked her flashlight, and the beams stayed true. Haruka gathered her notes she wasn't really writing, a superstition dressed as scholarship. They started up the stairs together, each explanation tucked neatly into place, each warning already given. The riser groaned under Takashi's foot, no different from any other old stair in any other old inn. He told himself that. They all did. And still, in the hush that followed, the inn seemed to lean forward slightly, listening, counting. The strange things don't stop, they repeat. At first, it's just the digital clock, sitting too proudly in the middle of a room that looks impossibly clean for a building abandoned 15 years. Its red numbers glow like coals. 11:47. The seconds climb steadily upward. 41, 42, 43, while the minutes begin to slip backward. 11:46. 11:45. Takashi wipes the lens of his camera and films it again, certain there's a trick of reflection. Miki puts a hand to the outlet. A faint vibration hums through the metal plate, cool and alive. Haruka whispers that nothing in the Ryokan should have electricity. They stare for a full minute as the seconds continue their ordinary ascent and the minutes continue their unnatural retreat. It feels wrong in the way a smile feels wrong on a mask. They step into the hallway, and the clock's tiny hum follows them like a mosquito. Far off, a lullaby threads the air, soft, breathy, nearly kind. Each time they stop to listen, it withdraws just beyond the boundary of certainty. Each time they move, it returns, like the tide drawing lace along a stone. They circle back to the clean room. The floorboards there are polished to a low, respectful shine. Dust coats the corridor, the window ledge, the ceiling beam, but the boards inside are unmarked, as if a caretaker had finished polishing them moments before the trio arrived. Takashi points out the faintest crescent impressions around the perimeter, places where someone, something, may have rested folded knees. He takes another video. The clock obligingly clicks to 11:41. The lullaby grows brighter, then dims, then returns with a second voice, then a third, tentative, half a beat late, learning the melody. Miki mouths the nearest notes, then startles to find she's crying. The tears form without heat or thought. They leave them on her cheeks, cooling as the hallway itself cools. Breath fogs the camera for a heartbeat. Takashi wipes the lens with his sleeve and checks the playback. The screen shows not the hallway they're in, but a parallel one, like theirs stretched to an unreasonable length. The perspective sits close to the floor. Shoji doors slide a measurement, then stop. Behind paper walls, candlelight drifts like gold pollen. They retrace their steps, hoping for the familiar shock of recognizing a trick. The camera's view wavers, steadies, and fixes on a corridor that is not this one. Haruka presses her ear to a door where the lullaby seems the clearest. The paper is cold. She hears the softest tapping, 3 raps, a tender pause, 3 more. A baby's knock. She thinks absurdly of someone asking permission to come inside. When she pulls back, the parchment clings a breath to her hair and then lets go, as if exhaling. In abandoned places, repetition is the true unnerving thing. Mice scrabble and you're relieved. You've named the sound. But when the same sequence returns, 3 steps, the pause. 3 steps, the pause. The comfort drains away. Here, the rhythm is deliberate. The tapping travels the wall, corner to corner, turn to turn, like the hand of a clock tracing a perimeter. In the polished room, the digital display agrees to the ritual. Minutes fall backward one by one, each fall punctuated by the distant knock. The intensity increases. When they stand still, footsteps resume in the ceiling above them. A measured pace from one end to the other, then back again, an insistent metronome. When they move quickly, the ceiling steps rush. When they slow, they slow. Mickey tests it like an experimenter with a lab rat and realizes, with a gulped laugh, that she's the rat. Her light falters, not dwindling, but pulsing. Dim, bright, dim, bright. Precisely one heartbeat apart. Loose battery, Takashi says, but his beam breathes in time with hers and Haruka's too. 3 different brands, 3 identical pulses. The hallway has found their rhythm and is playing them. They return to the staircase and the temperature drops a steep rung. Frost stipples the metal collar of the tripod. The lullaby grows more voices, women and men. Then a thinner thread that might be a child. It becomes beautiful in a wrong way, the way a weeping can be beautiful when it finally releases. Haruka catches fragments of old words like tugged silk, rooms prepared, arrival at the dark moon, a number that gives the pattern its completion. 7. The camera no longer politely misbehaves, it asserts. The viewfinder shows an upstairs bathing room, cedar-panelled, a soaking tub with water, bright and new, petals drifting like coins. No body disturbs the surface, yet the water moves, a curve of elbow implied, then gone. The lullaby leaks from that direction. The 3 stand together. "We're not alone," Mickey says. And here's how small she sounds inside the wooden bones of this house. Downstairs, their sleeping bags wait in a triangle like a protective charm a child might draw. The reception bell sits on its ledger, tarnished but game. When Takashi taps it, the ring comes back wrong. It doesn't ring in the room, it rings from a hallway the camera favors. He shows the screen. 3 ghost-pale figures. No, not ghosts, only light and shape. Make the motions of arranging cushions. He knows those cushions. The 5 Zabaton downstairs were newer than they had any right to be, set with mathematical precision around an absence. The figures lift and place, lift and place, and the cushions, invisible in the viewfinder a moment ago, settle with the smallest dustless sigh. The tapping returns, faster now, quick knuckles around them, like a courtesy turned to impatience. Pauses slip out of the pattern. Knock, 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 without breath, without grace. Their 3 lights are still pulsing. The camera slurs to static and then resolves. It frames the reception room where their triangle lies, but in the screen, they are not alone. Figures crowd the edge of the frame, transparent as breath on glass. Their eyes are closed, and yet the certainty of being watched presses on the scalp, the back of the neck, the place at the base of the skull where childhood fears sleep. "Do you see them?" Mickey asks. She doesn't mean Takashi and Haruka. She means anyone else. Anyone outside this building who might be asked to confirm. Anyone in the daylight world where electricity bills and train schedules exist. She imagines a police officer leaning back in his chair, smirking. Takashi thinks of the forum where he found the coordinates. No comments, no warnings, only numbers. The world outside either doesn't notice such places or refuses to believe them. Inside, the 3 have only each other, and belief is a thin blanket in mountain cold. The intensity scales again. The voices become words, archaic yet close. Prepare, arrange, receive. The digital clock keeps reversing minutes towards midnight, as if hurrying to an ending the house prefers. At each threshold they test. White cord crosses in patterns as neat as embroidery. Where did the ropes come from? How could old Shimenawa outside be frayed to yellow while these lines are white as breath? If there are caretakers, they are not living. By now, the repetition is oppressive. Lullaby, footsteps, tapping, the soft thrum of electricity that should not exist, the camera's insistence on a corridor that doesn't. Their own bodies begin to repeat too. Swallow, blink, glance to the same corner. Each gesture echoes, nests, returns. Every pattern asks for completion. Each pattern wants its number. The story has been set. 5 cushions in a circle, a polished floor without dust, a clock dragging time to a chosen edge, a chant that speaks 7 like a promise. "We're leaving," Takashi says, but he's quieter now, not wanting to interrupt the house in the middle of its sentence. They gather their things. The camera tilts and catches. For a heartbeat, their triangle surrounded by faint depressions in dust, knee prints, heel moons, the long oval of someone who lay on their side to listen. The image jitters. In the next instant, the room is empty again. Outside this place, people would say it's imagination, the way fear makes patterns out of noise. In here, noise makes patterns out of them. The events repeat. The pressure builds. The house does not care whether anyone believes. It only tightens the circle, minute by backward minute, until the ritual can finally say, complete. At the exact stroke of midnight, the Ryokan inhaled. The 3 flashlights, different brands, new batteries, fell into the same metronome. Bright, dim, 1 pulse per second. The room's corners thickened like wet ink. The air pressure pressed against their eardrums, and a fine frost crept across the brass bell on the reception desk, etching tiny fern-like veins that spread while they watched. Takashi checked the camera. The live feed no longer showed the reception room. It stared down a hallway that shouldn't exist, paper doors repeating into a vanishing point, floor-level view, as if the lens lay where a child might crawl. In the feed, doors slid open one by one without hands. From each, a figure stepped out. First a man in Meiji-era Western suit, then a woman in a floral yukata, then 2 children with shaved heads in matching night robes, each translucent, hollow-eyed, as if the light decided to pass through them. They turned in unison to face the camera. The lens trembled, although Takashi's hands did not. Sound arrived like a tide. It began with the polite rhythm that had been knocking through the walls. Tap, 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 pause. But the cadence multiplied, became 100 knuckles drumming from the wood itself. A second layer bloomed beneath it, whispering in an old dialect, vowels drawn long, consonants soft as breath against paper. Then the third layer, the one that nailed all 3 friends in place, singing. A woman's lullaby from upstairs, high and sorrowful, joined by men, then children, until harmony poured through floorboards and ceiling beams like warm water. It was beautiful enough to make your chest ache, and wrong enough to make your spine rebel. Miki's cheeks glittered with tears she didn't remember making. Haruka pressed fingers to her temples, translating fragments she did not know she knew. Prepare the rooms. 7 at the new moon. Guests. The circle must be complete. The flashlights froze mid-pulse on bright and stayed there, unblinking. The tapping stopped. For a breathless second, the only sound was that choir, layered until the melody braided into something almost mathematical. Patterns inside patterns, 7 notes that resolved only to start again. The building shivered. The reception desk ledger slid 2 inches by itself and snapped shut with a clap that broke the spell. Then the full manifestation began. From the far wall, 5 perfectly straight lines of dust rose as if lifted by strings. The lines hung vertical in the air, then flexed, bent, and curved inward until they formed a ring, exactly the diameter of the zabuton circle upstairs. Ash motes touched like joining hands. A sudden cold pulled the warmth from their cores. Their breaths came out as white ropes that intertwined and did not drift away. The camera feed cut to the upstairs suite with the impossible clock. Its red digits were running backward minute by minute, but the seconds kept climbing from 00 to 59 in the proper direction. In the live feed, someone had drawn a circle on the polished floor. 7 black strokes, each equidistant, each ending in the same crude symbol, a character like a gateway crossed by a bar. As the seconds advanced, ink bled outward from those strokes, spidering along the wood grain to form a net. "Look," Mickey whispered. Her voice shook the way glass hums when a truck passes. It's reaching down." The net wasn't only on the screen. Black filaments no thicker than hair seeped through the ceiling above them, dangling into the reception room like the roots of a drowned tree. The strands lengthened until they brushed the tops of the sleeping bags. When they touched nylon, frost spread in cracking rings. Haruka snatched her bag away. Where the filament had kissed, the fabric had gone rigid and rhymed, as if winter had bitten a single perfect crescent into it. The choir deepened. New voices entered, guttural, ceremonial, the kind used to read sutras. The beauty remained, but the tenderness was gone. This was not a mother singing. This was a ritual marching toward its proof. On the camera, the lens pulled, no fingers visible, down to floor height, and slid across polished boards toward the circle, gliding without footsteps. A shadow crossed the frame. Not a person, but the absence of one. A man-sized void that carried its own night around it. As it passed, the red digits on the clock smeared like fresh paint. Takashi swallowed. "We are leaving," he said, but the sentence had no traction. His legs understood before his head did. He couldn't make them move. The air clung to him with the texture of damp paper, thin but everywhere, sticking to hair, mouth, eyelids. Mickey tried to stand and found her knees locked together. Haruka's hand flew to her throat. Her necklace of tiny wooden beads had tightened, though there was no knot. The beads were warm, then hot, then scalding before cooling as if some unseen palm had let go. From the walls, the whispers cohered into words with the slow logic of a photograph coming up in developer. Guests, prepare, wash, soak. The syllables echoed like footsteps in a bathhouse. Water began to sound where no pipes should run. First a trickle, then a pour, then the clear constant rush of a tub overflowing. Steam rose in the camera feed, and flower petals, pale as old hands, moved in wreaths atop the water as if turned by someone's breath. A door slid somewhere behind them, not the front door, something internal, the quiet authority of wood that has always known how to move. The temperature plunged. Their flashlights threw harsher angles, as if the light itself had become brittle. On the edge of Takashi's vision, someone stood in the doorway to the left. He faced forward and saw only empty frame. The instant he relaxed, the figure returned in his periphery. Male? Female? Its silhouette was the shape of attention more than a body, the way a crowd makes space for what they cannot see. He thought of pressing the camera to his eye for courage. He found the courage to keep it away. "Don't look at them," Haruka said. "Old stories say they pull through the gaze." Her voice was steady, and that steadiness frightened them most. She had passed from fear to instruction, the way a priest does when the god finally arrives. The invisible ring of dust above the floor dipped, a table set for guests. Something seated itself directly behind Mickey. The nylon in her sleeping bag sank 3 inches with a sigh and slowly sprang back. Cold brushed her hair away from her ear and placed it there, carefully, as if tucking a child in. She bit the inside of her cheek until iron filled her mouth and found she could not feel the pain. Then the violence announced itself. It didn't start with thrown objects or slamming doors. It started with precision. 3 clicks, sharp, metallic, like nails tapping glass. The glass was her flashlight lens, a hairline crack spidered across it in perfect symmetry, dividing the beam into 4 thin blades. Takashi's camera jerked in his hands, not out of them, but down, as if the floor had risen to meet it. The tripod, locked and steady, marched 2 steps sideways with the creak of wood under weight and no feet on the legs. Above, the choir cut off mid-phrase. In the silence, the building groaned, the living groan of timbers remembering earthquakes. Plaster dust sifted from the ceiling in a white veil. Across the room, the antique bell on the desk rang itself once, twice, thrice, then flew into the ledger, denting its leather as if struck by a hammer. The sound made Mickey gasp. Breath left her and did not return for 2 long seconds. She slapped her chest, surprised to find the heart galloping against a cage of ice. Something ran across the ceiling, not an animal's scramble, but a human sprint, and stopped precisely above their triangle. The boards bowed down an inch, as if a dancer had stepped to the center of a stage. Fingernails raked the wood between the joists. The scratches came in sets of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Pause. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Closer each cycle. On the camera, the hallway that shouldn't exist became crowded to suffocation. Faces pressed to the paper screens from the far side, deforming the delicate lattice. Mouths opened wide in ovals, too round, too perfect, soundless in the feed yet roaring in the room. "Please," Haruka whispered to the unseen. "We are only passing through." The building answered with etiquette. The sacred ropes they had seen outside, old, yellowed, fraying, now reappeared across interior doorframes, fresh and white, weaving themselves in patterns that tightened and cinched. A knot formed, drew itself firm, and then another. Permission revoked. The ritual moved forward. Takashi forced his knees to unlock. The effort felt like wading through syrup. He leaned into Mickey and Haruka, pulling them shoulder to shoulder, heads almost touching, so their 3 cones of light overlapped and became one small sun in a universe that preferred moons. On the camera screen, that same tiny island of brightness appeared. But there were figures standing around it. Dozens, their faces turned inward, their eyes shut. As the frame held, one pair of eyes opened. The owner of those eyes did not blink. For a moment, nothing moved. Then every closed eye in the circle snapped open at once. The choir returned with a single note that split into 7, and the room rushed forward like a wave. The net from the ceiling dropped. The cold seized their wrists. The Ryokan, patient no longer, reached out to claim its guests. The woman in the midnight blue kimono stood there, a shape darker than the darkness itself, then slowly turned toward the main doors. No sound of footsteps, only the faint whisper of silk brushing across old wood, like the murmur of a mountain stream. Her hollow eye sockets looked at nothing, yet all 3 explorers felt the same cold sting climb up their spines. Her mouth was frozen open, a perfect circle, as if a song had been trapped inside but could never escape. The sacred Shimenawa ropes crisscrossing the doors began to untie themselves. Each knot loosened with patient care, as though invisible hands were pulling them apart. No one spoke, but all 3 understood. This was not rescue. This was an invitation, a ritual gesture meant for the unwise who dared to accept it. Mickey was the first to break through the suffocating silence. "We need to go," she whispered, her voice hoarse but determined. The words were like shattering a glass barrier that had held them in place. Haruka clutched the straps of her backpack so tightly that her fingernails tore against the fabric. Takashi instinctively grabbed the camera, still hoping to confirm what his eyes refused to trust. In the lens, the lobby was empty. No spirits, no kimono woman, just the three of them huddled together like lost children surrounded by endless shadow. They abandoned everything unnecessary. A half-eaten snack, a water bottle, spare batteries. Those things became offerings for whatever lingered inside. The three moved in a tight line, staying within the overlapping beams of their flashlights. The heavy door creaked open, and mountain air slapped them across the face, sharp, cold, carrying the scent of pine mixed with something sweet and rotten, like flowers left too long in stagnant water. The woman in the kimono was gone. No footprints, no sound, just a waiting void. Crossing the threshold felt like stepping over a border between two worlds. Every step weighed down like lead. The stone path was slick with moss, and the night wind cut their throats raw. None dared to look back, except Mickey. In that brief glance, the Ryokan was glowing with life. Not electric light, but the warm amber of oil lamps shining through shoji paper screens. Shadows moved inside, folding clothes, arranging bedding, preparing for rest. She heard faint laughter, the creak of tatami mats, the splash of water into tubs. For one chilling moment, the inn looked alive again, welcoming as it must have been a century ago. "Do you see that?" Mickey asked. Takashi and Haruka turned. To them, the building was black and empty, exactly as it had been. Mickey swallowed. "Nothing. Let's keep going." She knew that describing what she saw might drag them back like a riptide. The descent was longer than the climb. Takashi's watch ticked erratically, sometimes skipping minutes ahead, sometimes rewinding them. Time itself felt corrupted. Haruka stumbled more than once, gasping for breath, and Mickey kept whispering, "Don't fall asleep. Don't stop walking." She knew if one of them collapsed, the others would face an impossible choice: carry dead weight or abandon a friend. Past the Black Torii gate, the forest came alive again. Insects hummed, leaves rustled, an owl hooted in the distance. Not gradually, but all at once, like someone had flipped the switch for the world of the living. Relief washed over them, but no one slowed down. Safety was a fragile illusion. At last, their car came into view, exactly where they had left it. Takashi's hands shook so violently he fumbled with the keys, but when the engine finally roared, the sound was so ordinary, so human, that all three nearly cried. They drove down the mountain road in silence, headlights cutting through the dark. Only on the highway, surrounded by other cars and sodium street lamps, did the consequences begin to reveal themselves. Takashi flexed his right hand, the one that had held the camera for hours, but his fingers remained stiff, curled as if still gripping the handle. The skin along his wrist bore a faint red ring, like something had looped tightly around it. He couldn't remember when it had happened, only the harsh feel of rope digging into his flesh. Haruka leaned against the window, eyes shut tight. "The song won't stop," she muttered. It wasn't in her ears. It was inside her skull, humming from a well too deep to silence. Every repetitive sound, the car's turn signal, the windshield wipers, morphed into that same lullaby. 7 guests when the moon is dark. 7 souls to join the eternal bath. The fact she understood the words made them impossible to ignore. Mickey stared into the side mirror. At first, she saw only their 3 reflections, but for the briefest instant, there was a 4th figure in the back seat, head bowed politely, hands folded on its lap like a passenger who had been there the whole time. She spun around, nothing but empty upholstery. By the 3rd time she saw it, she chose not to look anymore. Some truths are better left unseen. "We made it," Takashi said, almost to himself, but the words rang hollow in the cramped car. They all knew the truth. Survival tonight was temporary. They had been allowed to leave, not rescued, like prey released to wander before being lured back. Back in the city, the neon lights and human noise felt overwhelming. They parked near a ramen shop still open late. The steam from bowls of soup warmed their faces, but their hands remained cold. Takashi turned on his camera, replaying the footage. Much of what they had witnessed, the spirits, the kimono woman, was absent. Yet something worse remained. In the reflections of windows, faint human shapes stood behind them, watching. In one scene, Haruka appeared to be chatting with someone invisible, nodding and smiling, though she had no memory of it. "Delete it," Miki said firmly. But Takashi's finger hovered, trembling. Destroying the evidence felt like cutting the last rope that tethered them to reality. If the camera was gone, how would they ever prove to themselves that it wasn't all madness? They ate in silence. The broth was hot, but it tasted like nothing. They swore to each other never to return, never to speak of it again. Yet, each carried a mark. Takashi with his rope-burn wrist, Haruka with the lullaby echoing in her mind, Miki with the shadowy passenger who sometimes appeared in the corner of her eye. They had escaped the Ryokan, yes, but the Ryokan had not let go of them. And deep down, they all understood the same terrible truth. They had barely survived. This time. The truth of the Ryokan did not arrive like a shout. It arrived like steam. Slow, enveloping, impossible to ignore once it touched skin. It began with Haruka's hand on the antique brass bell at reception. She wasn't ringing it. She was moving it to clear the dust when it rolled with a dull clink and exposed a narrow seam in the counter's wood. Inside, wrapped in oil paper that had wicked years of damp, lay a ledger, not the neat registry they'd seen earlier, but a private book bound with indigo thread. Its spine had been reinforced with rice glue and, more ominously, salt. The cover bore a name in neat brushstrokes, Eri, followed by the title Okami, the proprietress. Pages fluttered under their lights like moth wings. The first entries were ordinary. Dates, rooms, bath temperatures, deliveries of cedar logs and sake. Then, midway through the book, calligraphy sharpened, as if the brush had been clutched tighter. A circle was inked in the margin beside a single word repeated down the page. Shichi, 7. The story pieced itself together, as Haruka translated by whisper and gesture. The Ryokan had been founded in the late Meiji era around a spring the villagers called Yuzuki, hot water under the dark moon. Local belief held that the spring was the mouth of a mountain kami, and once each lunar cycle, when the sky was new and empty, 7 guests chosen by fate could borrow wholeness from the water. Not immortality, only a reprieve. Bathers with grief too deep, wounds that would not close, minds split by nightmares. The Okami welcomed them when other inns refused. In exchange, the mountain demanded observance. 7 zabuton placed at exact intervals, 7 lamps lit, 7 cups of warm sake carried to the edge of the water. 7 breaths shared in the dim before midnight. Completion mattered. The circle had to close. For decades, Eri kept the rite quiet and clean. Her handwriting recorded little tragedies that left lighter footprints after the bath. Husbands who slept again, a child who stopped waking screaming, an old wound that no longer ached in rain. "They do not leave cured," she wrote, "only return to themselves." Completion mattered. The mountains smiled when 7 sat together. Then came a winter of thin rice and bad news. The ledger's brushstrokes grew jagged. A landslide had dammed a tributary. The Ryokan's boiler groaned under erratic pressure. Eri begged the shrine priest down valley for guidance. His reply, tucked into the ledger with a strip of paper charred along the edge, was brief. "Do not break the count." But the 7th guest never arrived that night. Snow blocked the pass. Eri's staff set only 6 cushions, and told themselves intention would suffice. At 11:47 p.m., when the right should have opened, the boiler failed. Steam and carbon monoxide pooled low and invisible. 3 of the bathers staggered out into the hall. 3 sank where they sat, lulled by heat and prayer. By dawn, all 6 were dead. A police report that never reached the newspapers noted accidental asphyxiation due to mechanical fault. The priest called it by its older name, a circle left open. The Ryokan shuttered quietly soon after, officially for repairs, unofficially because villagers would no longer cross the garden. Eri's last entry was a line of apology to the mountain, and to the guests who trusted us with their sorrows. After that, the ink stopped. The book slept beneath the bell, salted and bound, as if someone feared what would happen if it breathed. The witness to all of this, it turned out, wasn't only the ledger. Wrapped deeper in the compartment was a scroll of Norito, a Shinto prayer, written on grit-smooth paper. The seal at its end was broken. Haruka unrolled it and found precise instructions for the Yuzuki rite. When to dim the lamps, how to pour the 7th cup, which stanza to hum as the minute hand tipped toward midnight. In the margin, someone, Eri, the priest, had added a small note in hastier script. If 7 cannot gather, hold the circle with breath and song until dawn. Between the lines, fine salt crystals had crusted like frost. Haruka read the Norito aloud before Takashi could stop her. It wasn't a choice so much as a compulsion, words reaching for a mouth. Her voice dropped into a cadence that belonged to someone older, someone who knew how to balance a room on the edge of dark. Miki squeezed her arm, but did not interrupt. As the final syllables left Haruka's tongue, the air changed. The oppressive silence gave way, not to noise, but to memory waking. The room answered, not with footsteps this time, but with arrangement. Dust sighed off the floor. The 5 new-looking cushions they'd found upstairs were not random after all. They were placeholders, waiting for 2 more. Somewhere in the building, a 6th and 7th cushion slid across bare wood with a sound like breath. Down the hall, lamps they had never lit sighed into a soft, steady glow. The exact honeyed tone Miki had thought she'd glimpsed from the path. The digital clock upstairs, that impossible red eye, ticked backward again. 11:46, 11:45, counting down toward a midnight that belonged to the mountain, not to them. And the woman in the midnight blue kimono? The ledger gave her a shape. Eri, the Okami, who had kept the rite for years and failed once, on the wrong night. The empty sockets were not mutilation. They were what eyes become when they spend a lifetime lowered in service, fixed on the water's skin for a ripple out of order, on the 7th cup for a tremor. Her mouth shaped a circle because the last note of the Norito was a circle, a vowel held until 7 breaths matched. She was not opening doors for them. She was opening them for the count. All the fragmented signs settled into place. The black torii at the garden's edge was not a corruption of red, but a mourning gate, painted dark to mark a shrine ashamed. The shimenawa on the trees had frayed because no one had renewed them. The fresh ropes at the exits were something else entirely. The circle trying, again and again, to close by keeping 7 inside. The whispers in an old dialect weren't hostile. They were inventory. Staff preparing rooms for expected souls and repeating the number like a drumbeat. 7, 7, 7. The footsteps in different patterns mapped the roles Eri's staff once walked. Pacing the corridor with towels, circling the bath with the sake tray, darting to fetch a lantern gone out. The synchronized flicker of their flashlights wasn't a battery fault. It was the right gripping rhythm, pulling living light into the mountain's metronome. Even the camera's view made sense now. Another tool forced to witness what ordinary sight could not, framing the bath as it was during the rite, not as it appeared between cycles. And the song, Gods, the song. A lullaby, yes, but not to soothe a child to sleep. It was the Norito smoothed into melody, easy to hum, a bridge between breaths when fear is a fist. The line Haruka translated upstairs, 7 guests arrive when the moon is dark, was not a threat, it was instruction. The next lines promised the exchange, 7 rooms prepared by morning's light, 7 souls joined in the eternal bath until the circle brightened. When the boiler ruptured and the 7th never arrived, the exchange curdled. The mountain kept its door ajar, and the Ryokan became a waiting room that sang. They did not need a priest to explain why time slipped, why the timestamps in Takashi's footage disagreed with the car clock, why 11:47 haunted every room. The rite had its own hourglass, and anything that stepped into its gravity learned to count by the mountain's minutes. That was why the impressions in dust had formed around their sleeping bags, not footprints of attackers, but the polite, terrible patience of hosts. The staff had sat with them through the small hours, arranging and rearranging the circle, inviting and inviting and inviting. Haruka finished the Norito with a word that meant release, and the Ryokan exhaled. Lamps dimmed, the backward clock died. For a heartbeat, the reception smelled of cedar and warmed sake, of wet hair and winter air and a kind of clean grief. Then it was gone. The door unbound itself because their presence had completed something the mountain would not accept. 3 who knew, rather than 7 who stayed. They ran because knowledge is not the same as immunity. But as they reached the path and Mickey turned to look back, the building wavered between 2 truths, dark and lit, empty and alive, because rituals do not end, they pause. The ledger under Takashi's arm grew heavy. He slipped it back beneath the bell as if obeying an instruction he had never been taught. By the time the road widened and the radio crackled them into ordinary night, the revelation had finished its work. The Ryokan did not hunt. It waited. Eri did not curse. She kept count. And every sign they'd tripped over on their way in, the shimenawa, the cushions, the humming, the synchronized light, had been the same simple message, spoken in the only language an unfinished circle knows. We are ready. We are 6. Bring 7. What do you think? If you were in their place after the camera failed, the doors sealed with fresh shimenawa and the lullaby named 7, would you have stepped through that open door or stayed until the ritual finished? Cultural, spiritual background. In Japan, the number 7 echoes through folk belief and Buddhist memorial rites. Families traditionally hold services on the 7th day after death and repeat them weekly up to 49 days, 767, a liminal period when the soul is thought to linger between realms. The Ryokan's 7 guests mirrors this idea of completion before passage. The shimenawa ropes and paper streamers, shied, mark spaces as purified or sealed, liminal thresholds where the sacred or the impure must not cross. Hot spring bathing isn't just leisure. In Shinto and folk practice, water purification, misogi, cleanses spiritual stain. A choir of eternal bathers bound to a once healing onsen becomes a cruel inversion. Cleansing turned into captivity. The black torii, the synchronized lights, the backward clock, all read as ritual cues, not random hauntings. Call to action. Tell us your take in the comments. Were Takashi, Mickey, and Haruka spared or chosen? Have you ever felt a place waiting for you? If this story gripped you, like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Don't miss next week's episode, A Mountain Tunnel, where traffic cameras record travelers who never existed.